Did I do the right one? I bet I didn't do the right one, did I? I did not.
Oh, good. I was really confused and thought it was just me and the hour.
Okay, how about that one? That should be this meeting's agenda.
Perfection.
That's what you get when you're in 86 different groups and you have 1,000 Google Docs open. Those of you just joining, there's the real agenda, not that fake one somebody was peddling around earlier.
Did you get your agendas confused again, Crow?
I did.
Frankly, I'm just ecstatic there are agendas at all, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for all the work.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So we can have a smooth and productive hour together. All right, everybody. Today is the September 21st edition of the OpenSSF's Education SIG. I will open up the meeting as is tradition. Do we have any new friends into the group that wanted to say hello and introduce themselves? Hey, Jeff, do you want to pop on audio and say hey? There you go.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, I'm new. I work at Sonatype. But just rejoined. I was at Sonatype back in the early days, 2012. So I work with Brian Fox. I'm on the DevRel team, but focused on sort of building out some of our initiatives education-wise for developers. So just thought I'd join.
Awesome. Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Any other new friends that wanted to say hello? All right. Could I ask for some assistance in taking notes today? Oh, David, you'll help me? Oh, thanks, Dave Russo. You're the bee's knees. All right. If you have any opens, please drop them into the opens section. As a note to everybody, the next time we have a full SIG call, which will be 2 weeks from now, we will have the section leads do like a 2-minute update as to any progress they've made in their subsections. I will open the floor now. I see we have some notes. Does Dave or Glenn want to share what their sections have been up to recently?
So we did not have a meeting last week because of the conference, OpenSSF Day. So we are actually a meeting behind. The information from our first meeting, which was September 1st, if I'm not mistaken, is down below under the team updates. We reviewed the pieces of the plan that were assigned to the curate content subgroup. Some things got moved around. We verified that everything listed that remains is indeed in our scope. And next meeting, we plan on starting to dig down and putting some tasks to those goals and assigning those tasks.
Awesome. Glenn, any quick update on your section?
Yeah, so we had 2 meetings already. The first one is indeed, well, validating the new scope items we got from Dave and his working group. And we all agree that they should foster a home at our place, so that's good. Then what we also discussed was basically we had already an action point for the Stack Overflow goal where we wanted to actually educate and improve code snippets that we have on the internet. For that, we talked also, and we had a meeting with together with Randall and Xavier to see if CodeQuill could be a solution there. So far, there are some interesting ideas, like extending the bug bounty program from CodeQuill point of view, creating some snippets maybe, or even building a sort of what is it, plugin for your browser that could, identify code snippets and using CodeQuill to then say, hey, this is good or bad. So there's some work in the pipeline. And let me see, we also had in the latest discussion, it was maybe a bit short-staffed one because of the weird time. Yeah, we put our SIG in a new time slot on the Thursday. But David, Randall, myself was there. I think also one of the ladies were there. And there we also discussed what should be in scope, actually. So what type of languages, but also what type of technology stacks. Because what we discussed was, okay, well, what currently is most burning and where people most need attention in is a web API, maybe mobile. But there was also this strong feeling that, for example, IoT could also be included in future scoping. For now, we think that would be maybe a year 2 goal, but yeah, at least do first what we can, and where we have materials for them, which is quite easy to have a good MVP. And that is basically web API and the probably also mobile, but we need to continue on that as well, that discussion.
All right. For those interested in participating, Glenn's next meeting will be 23 hours from now. So 8 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. And then I think our other groups are next week. The meeting times are all further up in the agenda. They're also, I've put them into the Git repository. So each plan now, if you go to each of the plan sections at the top of the document, it lists the meeting day and time, gives a link to Zoom meetings, and also a link to meeting notes. So you should have, a couple different ways to get in and get that information. So thank you for team 1 and team 2 for the update. Did Sal join us? No, let's see. No. So we'll get an update on group 3 next call. So a couple points of interest before we actually get into some work. I attended the Open Source Summit Europe in Dublin last week. It was a really great experience, hosted OpenSSF Day. Lots of interest and excitement around the education SIG. We actually had a birds of a feather session where a couple of us got together and were talking about possibilities for this group. I will take those notes and type them up. It's been a crazy week catching up. So I'll type those notes, put them here into our next meeting agenda so everyone can review them. And but the most exciting thing was I met a young lady in Dublin, Cassidy, and Cassidy works for the Linux Foundation. She is an instructional designer, a former educator, and she has lots of experience writing, training, and curriculum for learning objectives for classes. And she was over the moon that we existed and is really interested in helping out. So, and I also talked to a couple other folks in the Linux Foundation education team. So I think as we develop our plan, we'll start to include some of those folks so that they can start thinking about the more tactical aspects of, how could we write a class or a learning artifact around these types of things. So we're going to get some professional help, actual educators. So yay, that'll be, so Cassie will probably join us, I would say probably in a month or so. I'll invite her in. And once the plan is baked a little more. And then as another note, I reached out to a professor friend of mine who specializes in cybersecurity education. He actually, his team is part of a group within the States called the Collegiate Cyber Defense games where basically they red and blue team each other. A bunch of colleges get together and red and blue team each other. So this gentleman has a lot of experience within the cyber field. Is actually one of the few that's teaching cyber education today. And I talked with him about looking at the plan, and he gave it a quick look, liked what he saw initially from the main mobilization plan. And he has committed that he and some of the other professors within his group are going to collaborate, maybe provide us notes. And there'll be another nice sounding board for us, one of many professional academic touch points that we can reach out to. And then we just need to think about how we want to approach, career changers or professionals already in the field that are trying to upskill. So we just need to kind of think about these different types of contacts. But we're starting to get some momentum. We will have some actual educational perspectives that help us out once we get the technical bits together. Any questions about either of those things? Oh, Jeff, your background's in technical writing and education. Well, welcome. We're so excited. Cool. So we'll definitely be leaning. Oh, Kara, you too? Yes.
Yeah, you've got two of us. I'm a tech writer and I'm a former professor.
That's awesome. I'm so happy. Good. So once we actually have some materials, then we'll actually be able to leverage that expertise. Right now we have a lot of ideas. So any questions or comments, Randall?
I actually am inventorying all the materials that we currently have, which should be done by tomorrow. So if you want me to send you that list, Krob, I can.
That'd be great. Send it over to Dave too, Dave Rousseau,
Okay.
so because he's leading the curation effort.
Sure.
And I just dropped a link into the chat. We are actually gathering all that information in a document. If you'd like to put it right in there, that would be fantastic.
Yep.
Or you can
Thank
send it to me, whichever's easier for you.
Sweet. I'd love to see some progress. All right. Any opens before we move on to some administrivia? All right. I would ask everyone to please open up our README file. I'll put a link here in the chat. What I would like to do is take a look at our objectives and what is in and out of scope to make sure that those are what we wish to commit to. So if I could have you all scroll down to the objective section. Right now, we have two objectives: to provide access to open and widely available education materials to all learners. And materials will be maximally accessible and easy to consume by all learners. So as a set of goals, are we happy with those two things that are going to drive us forward and motivate us? Or is there any changes we want to make or any additions we want to make?
Krob, is that follow-on sentence and additional bullet points and additional objective, or is that just flavor text?
The deliver baselines.
Yeah.
And then the three, that's just how we're going to be doing that.
Okay.
So those are our three streams. And we can move that if it's confusing. We can reword it. It's open source. Patches are always welcome. So are we okay directionally with those two as being our objectives for this full SIG moving forward? That's what we want to try to achieve.
Yep.
Getting some head nods. Kara.
This is the most minor of all nitpicky nits, but are we providing access to open and widely available education materials, or are we providing open and widely available education materials?
That's
Like, do we need access to, or?
It's going to be a little of both, because we're not going to create all the materials. So as like within OWASP, there's a lot of really good educational materials that already exist. So we would find a way to showcase and route people that way. But then we will be creating new materials. And as Glenn mentioned, around mobile and API security, that's kind of a gap with some of our stuff. So I'm open to a better way to phrase that. That's what the group landed on a couple of weeks ago.
Sounds good then. That's fine.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right, let us scroll down to the scope work, which you can clearly see is in progress. I need to find the little yellow and black guy digging the hole and put that there. So currently, what is in scope? We will be in scope is training and education around secure development, management, deployment, distribution, and data access controls. What's in scope is incentivizing learning and hiring of certified practitioners, providing a platform or platforms for showcasing certification for learners, and collaborating with educators. So are we okay with those 4 things as being in scope of our work? Any additions we want to make or any changes or deletions? Glenn.
Well, should it also be in scope to maybe improve also other projects? I mean, maybe it's a bit too vague, but let's say we indeed consume from other partners that also have open source projects. We consume good material from them, but we see, hey, things are missing. Yeah, it would be awesome to also have here in scope that we help them and their project as well to further improve. And I mean, otherwise we miss, or we need to reinvent the wheel again, or put it somewhere where it doesn't belong. So I rather would also do a collaboration with other open source projects to improve their project as well, based on the feedback or the gaps that we identified from our point of view.
What does the group think about this?
I'm excited that Glenn beat me to it.
Ha!
And I was going to say the same thing. And aside from that, some non-critical wordsmithing, I think it's a good list. So thanks for saying it so well, so I didn't have to, Glenn.
If you look at our meeting agenda, I went down to the meeting notes section, and I've summarized Glenn and Vicky. So please feel free to adjust that. But basically, we'll potentially add an in-scope item to improve open source project security with our materials or training. Does that kind of capture the theme of what you were going for, Glenn?
Yeah.
But is it only open source projects, or does it also circulate back to the Stack Overflow, like improve the documentation, existing documentation?
Well, for that one, we actually have in our working group a specific item to improve, but mostly there, what we will do is we have done proper code snippets that are good, and we identify ideally with an automated way failures in forums or whatever, like Stack Overflow, which we then can link to a platform like SDF or whatever, saying like, here is the vulnerability, this is what's wrong, this is what it should be doing. Hey, you want to practice this in real scenario, how easy it is, and see the exploit, what hackers do with it, whatever. So we have that whole package of data. But this is specifically, well, I don't know, take, for example, the work of David Wheeler. It's really good, right? But yeah, we miss some categories there. So I would like to also, you know, build and extend and improve his project. Maybe the OWASP testing guide, that they miss certain type of vulnerabilities that should be on there, right? And so on and so on. So I rather want to then improve the project that's very mature and on itself already, you know, out there and recognized. I rather want to improve that than, yeah, that we are going to make a sort of local additions to that work, append it, and you know, that sounds like really bad way of trying to fix it. So I rather want them to reach out to those projects, say, hey, here's a PR, here's a improvement, and then really on that level do the collaboration. The other thing, indeed, that's more, like a separate item in our software improvement group, where we also want to tackle other sources, like standalone source, like a forum post or a website or Stack Overflow or stuff like that. So those are two separate things.
So I made a slight adjustment to what David captured. So potentially we can add in improve existing security education and open source software project security with our educational materials. Does that kind of help meet us in the middle there? So we're addressing, like what Glenn said, where we're providing feedback to like Wheeler's project and other projects that provide security education. We're improving documentation, but then we're also focusing in on software projects as well. Does that seem okay? All right. I will drop that into the, oh man, form of banana. All right, is there any other items we would like to consider to put into scope? And we have time, this isn't final. We'll take PRs going forward, but at some point we'll want to lock this down as the plan starts to solidify. All right, if there's no more feedback on what's in scope, let's look at the two items we listed as out of scope. We said explicitly out of scope is reporting of unknown security vulnerabilities in open source projects or taking action to remediate those vulnerabilities. And helping projects or individual enterprises with remediating their own security exposures from other open source projects' security vulnerabilities. So we're not in the vulnerability management incident response business with this particular effort. Do we agree with that? Okay. Is there anything else we would like to add as explicitly out of scope that we don't want to manage with this group? Glenn?
Oh, for me, I still find this very hard to carve out what is out of scope, because we started like, I don't know, weird shit like teaching somebody how to cook. That's definitely out of scope, but I mean, you see my point.
And I think the intention here is there's a high probability that somebody we interact with is going to have some problems while we're educating them, and they may ask us, what do I do to fix this?
But what would make sense is giving personal feedback to trainees or people who use the platform, the learners, in explanation of the certain material, right? Maybe they will come to us and say, hey, okay, please explain this vulnerability ABC. So it's not something like that. So, but that's very, I would say, close to what we're trying to do. For me,
we don't want to write patches, and we don't want to become security auditors or run scanners for them.
Yeah, or like an ad hoc consultant, which they can ask questions to, or I don't know, those type of things. I think actually what is out of scope now, for me at least, is already pretty clear from reading what is in scope that we're not doing that. So should we name it? That is also my problem here a bit. So what is out of scope? Well, like being a consultant or giving one-on-one feedback on the training material explanation. Yeah, that's something we definitely not gonna do, right? Maybe they think based on all the materials we have, or they want to, but that is definitely a no-go, I say, out of scope. Helping with technical issues, if they can run a tool or follow a certain path, I mean, yeah, again, but I think it's a bit hard to And these things here are already for me clear that of course that's not that's out of scope. So should we name it? But that's a bit my issue here.
Okay. Randall, what are your thoughts? I see you next, and then Kara.
Building off of what Glenn said, also, we do like the first one seems like it's the SIG cert. That seems like something the SIG cert
Correct.
would do.
Correct.
And the second one
Not
seems
this
like,
cert.
and you
Not this SIG.
exactly. But the second one seems like end user working group.
Yes, also not this SIG.
Correct. So that's but I'm just saying, what I'm trying to say is that could we forward them to those people, or maybe
Absolutely.
like maybe figure out or talk to them in that way, like I said, building off what Glenn said, because I mean I'm part of both SIGs, so yeah, like I don't know, you are too, and I think a lot of people here are.
And so potentially, because we do have other groups that do these things, we could incorporate that into our educational materials. If you have questions about reporting vulnerabilities, go talk to this group. If you are curious about end user consumption of open source and how to deal with these things, go talk to this other group. So we potentially could build that into our materials.
That's what I was saying, but yeah.
Kara, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, in agreement with Glenn as well. It just seems like there's a really big distance between what we are stating is in scope and then going way over there for what's out of scope. He mentioned a bunch of things that I was going to mention. The one thing I'd add is maybe, since we're mentioning certified, incentivizing hiring of certified practitioners and providing a showcase for certifications, maybe pointing out that out of scope, I'm assuming, is actually certifying or doing any sort of certification ourselves. So adding things that are a little closer to the scope itself. Is that
the Wheelers class, you actually can get a certification, and that is potentially something we could do. Is create additional. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that.
Okay, so then don't mention that. Leave that.
But that is a possibility if the group wants to do that. If we feel that this new content is important enough, we could make some type of credential potentially.
Okay, then in that case, I'm just saying +1 to Glenn.
Okay. Do we want to remove those two items? Are we uncomfortable having them there, Mr. Rousseau?
I tried to grab part of the conversation in the document. I added 2 potential points for out of scope. I think I got the gist of what everyone was saying.
Okay, so take a look at our meeting agenda. We're on page 4. Dave added providing personal guidance or feedback to individuals or groups using the education materials and assisting with technical issues related to the educational materials. We okay adding those things? Any additional thoughts? A moment while I'm typing. All right, any additional thoughts or comments on either our objectives or what we'd like to formally document as in scope, or at least mention as out of scope? Alrighty then. If there are no additional thoughts, give me a second. With that, all right, let us move on then to issue number 11 in our repository. I'll drop a link here in the chat. So another working group identified a problem that is kind of spans the whole foundation. And they felt that this group was the appropriate place to manage this particular problem. And a couple of weeks back, this group agreed to it. So I would like to talk about what we can do to move this particular issue forward. And we started a a glossary file, and it is full of a lot of things, but not a lot of definitions. So how can we as a group start to move this forward? Kara?
I mean, if you're just looking for practical steps, I mean, maybe this has been talked about before, but just in case it hasn't, if we've got a file without definitions, maybe we can just start copying in different, say, let's say a sheet, spreadsheet, different columns, different definitions from, say, ISO or Library of Congress definitions. And I see in the issue, there's a couple linking out to existing info. So if we can get 3-4 columns of different definitions, and then a last column that people can start commenting on how that works for us. And then we can just prioritize and isolate the ones that seem to have the least agreement and bring those to the discussion.
I think that's an excellent path forward. What does the rest of the group think? Any other feedback?
Well, we definitely, I think, need to have it. I'm just thinking, like we also try to overcome the same issue that we have in SKF with all the jargon. And we basically create like these knowledge-based items with, well, the weird abbreviation, the jargon, and then the explanation below. Also, I'm just thinking, if we have this list and it's all in separate markdown files, for example, then we can also reuse a part of SKF where you have a chatbot where you can just ask, hey, what is this? And then it will say, you can deploy that thing in Slack, I don't know, like 60 different chat channels, Microsoft Teams, whatever, it all will work there. But it's just about the content now. That is the bottleneck, the technical part actually, and how to get it to the people and easily consumable. Yeah, we already have stuff for that we can reuse on itself, like a standalone small API or whatever that we can make available for everybody to use.
Now, this list started out predominantly focused on vulnerability management. And I think especially in this area, when we're interacting with developers, we're going to need to add developer-centric terms like, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, buffer overflow, those types of standard definitions. What does the group, I really personally like the idea of having this collection of files that we could, throw out to Slack or SKF, as Glenn mentioned. Any other thoughts on that idea? So the $100,000 question before us is, I'll let Randall speak before I ask my amazing question.
I actually kind of have a comment because I wouldn't do it justice, but I know that David has a lot of information and a lot of thoughts about, because he's talked to me about like how, because as I said, I'm helping with SKF. So we had a meeting and like he has some thoughts about how we should move forward. So I think that some of this might be good to bring David on for a discussion. So just saying.
David is a member of this group.
I
If
know.
he chooses not to show up, I can give it action him.
Indeed, definitely probably will revisit this, but just to give you an idea, so also what we did is for web-based type of jargon, we used this markdown format. We also took from the CWE content.
Very nice.
And there are like already 400 plus, I think, knowledge-based items in there about SQL injection and Stride and I don't know, all these type of things. But yeah, we could extend these easily because these are all vulnerabilities, right, in web API and application development. But it's missing quite a lot of the list that you're showing here, like what is NIST or
Yeah,
what is
this one is this list started out very focused. And then the idea blossomed. The foundation probably should have a dictionary of how we, when we use a word, what it means.
SOS, DOS, EOS, the SCA, all those type of tools. Also the development tools like linting, I don't know, name it, and we should add like a knowledge base or like a markdown file explaining it. Yeah.
So back to my question I was about to pose the group. Do we have anyone that has the interest and availability to start compiling some of these definitions, and then we can figure out the implementation in a future meeting? Does anyone have time to focus to start to collect some of these or existing materials? Like Glenn mentioned, he has a bunch of stuff and Wheeler has some stuff. Can I get somebody to start?
I
writing
can
things down?
do some of it.
You volunteer
I
for
have-
a lot of stuff, Randall. I don't want to get you
Well,
overlooked.
this is something that I can offload onto the other people that are helping me in SKF.
Yeah. We
I can
open
help.
source and enable the community.
Yeah.
Something to say, Abhishek?
Yeah, I can help. I can work with Randall.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. And then if we can just start to write definitions down, and then in a future meeting, once we get Wheeler involved, we can figure out the exact implementation of what this might look like. But I'd like to start to get some of the information together.
If I may, like, just to give a
You
short
may.
summary of what David said, this might not be the whole scope, but we did talk about how SKF, like we talked about SKF being the platform basically, because SKF, the ideology is to like give people like a progression so you could learn like in a progressive way. And that's the idea of SKF. Now, the idea of it being like the platform is difficult and probably not likely, because there are different expectations and different ways that the learning needs to be packaged to meet different goals. But basically, he said, kind of in an ideal world, maybe we could do like two platforms that are interlinked. I also want to mention a big thing of SKF is to leverage a lot of the stuff that already exists. So yeah, and another thing I want to mention that David mentioned is that, so you can get David's course from EDX, or you can get it from his website, or you could get it from SKF. However, or GitHub, correct. However, he mentioned that most people gravitate to EDX. And it's all the same information. So his, like what he suspects, it's because of the platform and the learning experience. So he kind of told me to use that as a build off point. So yeah. Just so that adding context.
Yeah, and I think down the road, again, now that we've got some contacts within the LF education group, I think that can definitely help us when we get to that delivery aspect, when we're ready to start thinking about the channels we want to push these materials out to.
Yep.
And I believe any new materials we make, if it's an actual traditional class, will probably also follow the existing model of the edX, LF training, and then SCORM Connect. So we would probably produce it at least through those three channels for a more traditional class.
Right.
Exactly.
And just so you know, also, and people in this group know, so kind of leveraged my Astro connections and got like a group of about 8 developers interested in security that are also, they're currently on, they all work at Astro and they're all front end developers. So I kind of got them all signed up to rebuild or do work for SKF basically.
Oh, I see Glenn with a smile.
Very big smile, yes.
He already met some of them. And I brought
Correct.
some of them
Yeah.
around here as well. And yeah, Peter's involved, Anthony, and those people.
Indeed, that's very promising indeed. And indeed, just like Randall says, the outcome should be that the materials that we have, especially in the more traditional form of education, right, needs to be consumable by multiple platforms, the edX and just the things you mentioned.
Yep.
And if you indeed want to go more full into depth, which takes more time, of course, compared to just the other platforms, that's okay as well. But yeah, like David says, it's good that we have these multiple platforms and choices which people can study the material that we develop, that we get together, and that we are going to offer. And yeah, the whole difference is same stuff you can do, right? The David course only in SKF, you get the labs and really interactive. You can play with the things. It's a bit of a longer journey, but it's very practical, right? And like he mentioned as well in that meeting, some people don't want to. They just want to do the materials, the content, the theoretical part, and that's also good. But for others, we also have the capability to go really deep into the rabbit hole and see how deep the hole is.
And I think that'll be an interesting conversation we have in your sub team, Glenn, talking about what channels or medium or methods we want to produce this content in. And we'll need to probably make some type of matrix.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that'll be an interesting conversation and an ad for Glenn's meeting. We'll be talking about that someday, about how we're going to, based off the content, how does it, what channel or channels does it go out through? All right, so thank you, Avishai and Randall, for helping start collecting some of these definitions. Do we have any additional thoughts around that? Any more comments around the terminology? All right, does anyone have any, Kara, please.
I'm sorry, it always takes me a second to find the hand,
Yeah, I
the
know.
hand tab. I was just thinking if it might be good to consider having a sort of default, like if all the definitions seem equally good, we will default to ISO, or we will default to some existing thing just to cut down on the work. But I don't know if there's any strong preferences. It seems like there's a lot out there that we don't need to reinvent.
The boggle with ISO is a lot of the materials are behind a paywall, which is restrictive for some fun. I don't know about terminology specifically, but like a lot of the standards you have to pay to get to, which excludes members of the community from getting access to. But yeah, I think that's good to have a default, this is our preference if everything's generally equal.
I just put a link. I think we should be able to access all the definitions through there's an online browser that I just put a link in there. The only catch is that, you put in something like provenance and you get 3 pages and you have to filter out the ones that are about art and, not relevant, but there's usually pretty good stuff in there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So do we want to express a preference for definitions today, or is that something we want to discuss further in a future call?
I had a comment about this.
Please.
I think that we should try to stay away from like government and like things that could be nationally defined, because some people have the opinion that like here in the US, we like to impose our ideas on the people. So I would encourage things like FIRST, maybe FIRST has good definitions, or CERT, or kind of like a agnostic group. Just gonna say,
Like an organization like ISC squared, ISACA.
exactly.
Yeah.
Even I think Cloud Native has a few as well.
So I guess Randall and Avishai, as you're collecting definitions, if you could note the source, and then as we go forward, I assume at some point we'll have a conversation about what we would like to make our primary authoritative definition from. Glenn.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that back in the day, but that's already a couple of years ago, when we looked at good sources, the one that really was extensive was the Mitre. So maybe we can also reach out to them if after our collecting of possible sources, it turns out that they're still sort of king of the hill with the most extensive knowledge sections, then probably we should reach out to them to see if we can work together to add the missing pieces there, so we have one source of truth to actually get all the information from, right?
I think we have some members here like Daniel from Sync. I think they have an extensive glossary on their website as well.
Exactly, and also the different type of attacks and methodologies, and so. But let me see.
I
what
can
what
actually
to-
talk to him because he's been looking into getting involved with things and where he can get involved. So maybe I could talk to him about helping with the glossary.
Cool. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Randall and Abhishek, just FYI, if you didn't see, Jeff also volunteered to help with the effort
Cool.
of gathering the materials.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, are you on the Slack channel?
I don't know. I signed up and joined stuff yesterday, so I'm not sure. I'm in like the Linux Foundation Slack, if that's where it is. But if you can point me to where I should be, I'm happy to join that too.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'll send you a link here.
Can
Right, perfect. Thanks.
do- Where is that? There it is. This should be the link to our Stream One Slack channel. Should pop you right in there with a bunch of friends.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's all in the Git repo.
Well, these
Awesome.
early meetings, I got to do them like in my car so I don't wake everybody up because it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And if I do it outside, I'll get attacked by mosquitoes. So
All right. Well, everybody, is there any additional topics we want to discuss today before we wrap? All right. I don't see anyone clamoring for attention, so I want to thank everybody for your time today. I think this was very productive, very excited, and look forward to the individual content stream calls to actually start and continue refining the plan. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your days. Cheers.
See everybody.